뭐야, 다든지 나더니 간저래서 나더니 당가랑솔라 요바데 가래서 나랑솔라 다 링아 있음센 당가랑솔라 요바데 링아 있음라와 근데 다 링아 있음 되더니 그 가서 링아 있음 그 권이 냠슬에 당세 거와 어떤 로지더니 영나는 더니 링아 있음 더니 냠는 제당와 어떤 저거 당니더니다 아지마 셰기 요바레스.
So, what is it that we possess? We possess body, speech, and mind, correct? So, when we practice, we need to practice in terms of what we have, and what we have is body, speech, and mind. So therefore, what we're going to discuss is how to practice in terms of body, speech, and mind.
Oh yeah, 그러니까 진짜 도그깔라요 여러 왔더니 도그깔라요 더니 다같이 목갑들라 뭐 요랬어. 아서 가서 리그 권이 냠는 제당과 대라 리그 권이 냠는 제당 아니 나가 권이 냠는 제당과 조대 셈레 센이라 다 조셈레 센이 셈 권이 냠는 제당 어떤 저더니 더니 도구 갑라요 좀 송여레스.
So generally in the context of the sutras, and when we say sutras here, we're talking about the Mahayana. It's taught how one practices with the body. It's also taught how one practices with one's speech. However, the main thing is said to be the mind. And so we talk about how to practice in terms of mind.
다단가 라메 그깔라 간저스나 리 코랑 냠는 뜻이야봐 나 코랑 냠는 뜻이야봐 셈 코랑 냠는 뜻이야봐 그것도 잡으려 그랬어 하고서 리지고니 냠는 잡아대다 이거로 봤더니 리지고니 냠스 리한테다 도 깔라요 이거로 봤더니 이나 대다 저거 말아 리 코랑 냠는 뜻이야봐 알아서 리 코랑 냠는 뜻이야봐 나 코랑 냠는 뜻이야봐 셈 코랑 냠는 뜻이야봐 어떤 리데 가서는 때 라메 그깔라 알아서 라타티 리데 강원이 바 코랑 냠는 지야요 봐 알아서 그 같이 강원 샤바데 냠는 지야요 봐 하고서 돈다 자당가서 그 리지 권이 냠는 가르쳐 땅여 대세기요 말았어 나 그 권이 냠는 가르쳐 땅 대세기요 말았어 리 코랑 냠는 뜻이야 봐 셈 코랑 냠는 코랑세 나고서 셈 코랑 냠는 근데 나랑서 다다 리 강이 바데 리 코랑 냠는 뜻이요 그랬어 되게 잡으려 그랬어.
So when we talk in sutra, it's how one practices with the body, for example. However, when we talk about in terms of the unsurpassed mantra vehicle, it's not exactly like that. It's how to practice the body itself.
리지 권이 냠슬레 땅 간다요레 텐디셰기마다 리코랑 것도 제게요. 리코랑 그랑신 강원이 받으셔야는데 리코랑 냠는 듯이 봐세요. 하고서 근데인다 리코랑 냠는 듯이 봐. 나코랑 강원이 받대. 나코랑 냠는 듯이 봐라 왔던. 어떤지 셈코랑 냠는 듯이 봐. 대다 조주 강양 맞득 봐. 조주 맞득 봐서는 하고서 조주 맞지 봐. 조주 메이크업 조주 강양 맞지 봐.
So when we talk about these things in the unsurpassed mantra vehicle, it's a direct introduction to the nature of the body, a direct introduction to the nature of speech, mind, and so forth. So it's introducing the body itself. It's not something that's done with the body, but it's introducing directly the body itself, and it's something that's not fabricated or made up.
Yeah. 지도대는 거라서 막 줄게 지성아이나 람칠세기요. 람칠세나 하고서 람칠세나 그러라고 인지 하고서 남대체로라. 람칠. 말랑 가래이나 남대체로. 근데 냠는 지용데 따서 가서 가래레스나 되네. 따다 가래이나 냠는 체와는 가라서 리용한테니 람대 체래 요레스. 나랑 남대체 세명 남대체 봐라. 알아서 그리 나 일심가 때 남대체는 냠는지야. 제땅 걸. 다들 냠는 그 다르트 봐. 알아서 무슨 유바된 냠는 책이었어.
So generally when we talk about the mantra vehicle, we talk about taking things onto the path as how one practices. And this is in terms of anything at all one takes onto the path. So when we talk about body, we talk about even taking the body itself onto the path, and that's likewise when we're talking about speech and mind. So in the mantra vehicle, we take body, speech, and mind, all of those onto the path, and that's how we practice. And so when we're talking about the ultimate practice here, it's whatever one directly or manifestly has, one practices with that.
Any carson at the also Kare Tongatam, Kare Sharvatam Chilla, Mandil Lamchers. Mandres and Hakosa after Mandala, the Teni Lam the Chetava, or the Chine. The knee, Matapa Lam the Cheta. Matapa, Chutam Matapa Mara, Matapi Lamcher or Ratin, Mancher Matapa Lamcheta. Any Dingik Lamcher, Chetam and Ures, Tamunga and Ures, Tamunga and Ures. Any that Tamu Maimbaga, that Carson, legal launcher, legal launcher, knuckle launcher, single launcher, and which is out of.
So generally, there are lots of things that we can take onto the path, and this is especially the case when we're talking about the mantra vehicle. So, for example, it is said that the unsurpassed way to take things onto the path is by taking all appearances onto the path. And so this is in terms of everything that one sees or experiences can be taken onto the path, can be taken as the mandala. So this is when we talk about in the mantra vehicle. Now when we're talking about the ordinary or common way of taking things onto the path, we talk about taking things such as impermanence or taking suffering onto the path. However, when we talk about the extraordinary way to take things onto the path, this means that we take body, speech, and mind onto the path. We take everything onto the path.
Oh, yeah. That's it. The in the circles and the Nita, Nasutana, Benatini, Metapic Lamchetavajira, Metapic Lamchetavajila, some of the Tamatapa Kandachi, London Chergores and Atela, Sheer, Nam, Sanwa, Shinang Sansam Guni, Kuno, Lamson Chetam, Tachetam, Tamungo, and the Shechokres, Jayores.
So for example, when we talk about taking impermanence onto the path, how is it that we should think about that? Well, we can speak about it in terms of outer, inner, and secret. So even when we're talking about things in a common or ordinary context, we can talk about things in this way.
Any should go Metapalam the Cherton the country, should division your vasegres, division your Hakosan, Dij, it's Yarkijila, Gunka Lebravatani. Gunkijila, Donka Lebravat. Donka Gila, correct. Yarkijila, Teni, Donka Lebravatani. Yarkijila, Donka Legre, Donka Gila Calegre.
Donkagijila Chigar.
Mare, Gunka Gila, Shikalegre. What in the China? Tenichina, Tijin Jervatella, Tapatamanga, Tijin Jervating, and also the Samaga, Sorgandaga, Samaga Hakogundaga. Hakoya Tijin Jervatella, she Tijin Jervas, she Tijin Jervatella, a Yarkajilana, Yarlam, Toya Potam, Namshi Akoyana, Lamsan Jervatin, and Tonga Legrova, Tenijin, any Tonga Gilat and the Chigars and the Lamsan, Namshi Tomutan, Kalakawachi, Gunkalevia, Tenduga Carsenatini, Rapatelatini, she Tijin Jervas, or they Carsenatini, Matapa, she Tarta Matapa and Yamsen, she Tijin Jervala, Samotamera, what in the Chita in Yamenchiva Esten.
So what is it like when we're talking about outer impermanence, for example? Well, we can think about it in terms of time. So, for example, we can talk about the 4 seasons. So, if we start with summer, once summer ends, then we have autumn. Once autumn ends, then we have winter. Once winter ends, then we have spring and so forth. So we all have this kind of experience. We all know about this. We can see this. We see how the seasons change in terms of the 4 different seasons. So for example, during summertime, the weather's very nice, it's very warm, but then once winter arrives, it's very cold. So we all have this kind of experience. So we can think about outer impermanence in this way as being a change in time, like the example of the change in seasons.
근데 인디 다서 다가르스나더니 노 종아실라더니 인지르바텔라 종아juk 인지르바텔라 상노당달이나더니 마타팔더니 가르스나더니 네 냠는지리오레스.
When we talk about this inner impermanence, we talk about it in terms of the four elements. So what we have is the four elements. The four elements is what composes or makes up the body. And so we can think about how it is based on having this aggregation of the four elements that the body changes. And so we can practice thinking about impermanence in this manner as well.
근데 다스다가르스나 당고 종아도서 가장이 시바에 반 종아도서 족진이 와서 종아도서 냠든 좀라와 니 종아도서 타지 찌그 족라 찌족 찌지니 내가 알아서 그 되니 리스포데 족이어 했어. 근데 내가 알아서 리스포데 가르니 쳐바래 종아지 남 종아가 로바든 종아가 된들래 니 쳐바래 했어.
So, if you will recall, first when we discussed about the elements, we talked about how the elements aid or assist each other, and by assisting each other, they help to compose or make up the body. So the body is made up by these 4 or 5 elements.
근데 내가 소 페이지 시작하에 나서 사극함이로 왔더니 종아제 그 사극함 되고 더니 알아서 그 저보다 샤이로 왔더니 샤트서 더니 찌기요 했어. 아니 사극함 되게 샤찌긴가 더니 척극함 되고 알아서 차가요 왔더니 저보다 차도서 찌기요 했어. 더니 매극함 그 가르치게 그래. 알아서 저보다 전드가 저리요 와 저도서 찌기요 했어. 아니 사치메 아니 롱르바 롱그 감근 알아서라 우일래야가 우일래요 버튼에 대 가르르서 롱그 감고 찌기요랬어. 된들이 아니 사치메 롱니 남키 감대가 알아서 그랬더니 셈 넘버 10바가 남키 감 그랬더니 찌드는 종아가 알아 되니잖아. 아니 냠든 디다는 데라 되니다는 아니 찌쪽 찌지다니 니 말아서 다 가서 그랬더니 오늘은 지금 뭐 알아서 스포라 받는데 같더니
So, for example, if we talk about the elements, first we talk about the element of earth, and the element of earth is what develops or composes our flesh, for example. When we talk about water, water is what composes the blood of the body. When we talk about fire, it creates warmth for the body. And when we talk about wind, it's what creates the breath. And when we talk about space, it is what facilitates consciousness. So we can see here how each of these elements assist each other or aid each other in order to make up the aggregates of our body.
호텔라 때는 답변이 seleng요랬더니 아니 시다 상와다던 용화의 틈름 세나 하고서 틈름 세나 하고가 지라 틈고로 왔다 가서 용화도 소소소소 했더니 칸톤적으로 왔더니 칸톤데 때리는더니 가서더니 샤 살라 틈바 아니 가서 착칠란 틈바라서 용화랑 라더니 더니 틈바세 틈 세나 하고서 왔더니 틈름 그때는 가서
이해적이래.
틈 세나가를 야비 그때래 가래
Disalterated.
저같은 틈지들 그때는 등록이 그랬을 때라 틈름 세기래. 데라 상노당 같더니 이 강서구 냠는 집아 데라든 가르스나 시에나 상와다더와 어떤 진종하라요 어떤 지대리나 이와 친이더니 다 냠는 그 메타피고 그 냠는 제당들이 시기랬어.
이 템르선은 디상웨입니다.
상웨입니다.
And so again, these 4 or 5 elements, they all aid each other in order to develop or compose the body. And so we can see these different ways how they change. They change in terms of the outer, inner, and secret. And when we talk about the secret, they change in terms of how they all dissolve. And so there is a way that we can practice in terms of how they dissolve. So when we're talking about change or impermanence, we can also talk about change in terms of instance, and not just instance, but the smallest possible instance as well. And this is discussed extensively in Nippon Rinpoche's Kenjuk, or Gateway to Knowledge. And so things change moment by moment, even at the most subtle level, things are always changing. So we can think about impermanence in this way and practice according to that. So when we're talking about these four elements, there are ways of talking about them in terms of three aspects: the outer, the inner, and the secret. And so this is how we can practice with these four elements in terms of their outer, inner, and secret aspects. And this is what's referred to as taking impermanence onto the path. So what we just discussed is the aspect of impermanence, and so that's what we need to practice in that context, practicing in terms of impermanence in that way. Additionally, we can also take samsara onto the path, right? So where is it that we all stay? Where is it that we live? We live in samsara. So this is what we need to take onto the path. And when we talk about taking samsara onto the path, we talk about taking samsara, cause and effect, onto the path. So again, when we're talking about taking samsara, cause and effect onto the path, there's a common approach to this. There's an ordinary approach how to take samsara, cause and effect onto the path. Chile.
Chile sana
Lega.
Actually it is.
Namba ngo chili tendru mambo go ni nyamlen chetang go tendru yores.
And when we're talking about it in terms of the highest practice, we talk about practicing things in terms of their essence, or based on the essence of the thing. So there are actually many ways to practice, and essentially there are three. There's practicing in terms of aspects, practicing in terms of essence, and practicing in terms of activity.
제당 주요 맞았어 맞소 도그 망쳐와지 가르치 시작했더니 너 짐지다 시기요 맞다 제당 주요다 시기라 다 제다 냠는 제당 주요다 냠는 제당와 된지 되니까서는 되니다 막 그깝다 버지 있나다 바절까서는 되니 망쳐와지 라메다 되나 지 강서버 됩니다 짐질이 디비기 주디 시기요 맞다 짐질이 디바스나 하고서 짐질이 디비기 주디라 답성하이나 딱가서는 남바다 냠슬렌타라 하고서 다다시바이 남바다 냠슬렌타 뭐다 냠슬렌타라 어떤지 지달리나다 저 탐지 그가서는 되니 냠는 그 되니 냠슬렌타 저 상마더니 하고 그랬어 된저마 된저스 상마 하마고 소야나 삼삼나 가서는 되니 가서 그랬더니 내 냠는 제냥거 말했어요 삼삼마 빵샤를 세건 좀 라더니 그러니까 냠는 게내 몸을 좀 충족으로 봤더니 세우 맞춰봐도라 충족해 되는 용비였어 근데 지금서 뭐지 빼샤먹고 노안용 그래 봐 빼샤먹고 따용 그래 말해 왔더니 근데 다스더니 니 도스테세 가서 그래 이게 취직이 나서 시야용나 내 강따들이 나가면 따들이 뭐 따듯이 얘기한다 남바 따들이다 공기 질리래 된다 yana deja jana to ni sheba jigren mambo yoreste deja janda tenira deja jang ngola to ni sheba uni mai bala deja jang khatama ichi deja sena kare deja
Someone to be changed.
Oh, ducha.
deja janda ko ngola tin songbara denje getene tinita namba mambo jigar ba 어디서 탐지 가려임 받았다 소소 냠냠 싸고 봐 냠냠 싸 냠냈더니 하고나 인가랑서 소소기 냠스 렌다다 몰라 남던 제당 상마서 우체더랬어 하고서 된들
So usually we talk about practicing things in terms of cause and effect. However, when we talk about the unsurpassed mantra vehicle, mostly we talk about phenomena that transcend cause and effect. And so this is why it's important to know how to practice things in terms of their aspect and in terms of their essence. So we need to understand this. This is really important here. If we don't understand this, then we will think that a lot of things are to be abandoned and a lot of things that we do are to be abandoned, and then a lot of our activities will end up in conflict, and this will be difficult for us. So there are lots of different aspects that we need to understand, and especially based on the particular student or disciple, we need to get experience so that we know how to practice according to our situation and know how to show the path, and then these things will become clearer.
탐체 되니 람든 체라지 하고서 정말 람든 체다 탐체 람든 체를 터야 아까 던지고 가서는 말아서 냠냠 싸고 그랬어 그러봐 배차 뎁직도네야 뎁되게 나와 던지 람 열었은 데가서 판톡 그러면 무슨 라면은 판톡 말해 하고서 뺀나 네바직이구나 네바 하고서 네바 때라더니 만그 때문에 나나 만 나데라 만 되게 판톡 그랬으니 만그 이게 되면 lokta kuna nalla pantokre
Pantui maro.
그 더고 말했어요.
Whatever happens or whatever occurs to us in this life, anything that we see, everything that we experience, all of this is to be taken onto the path. So we need to experience, we need to gather all of this experience. So for example, if we just read something in a book, but we don't actually implement it or put it into practice, there won't really be any benefit, there won't be any help for us there. And to give another example, if we talk about someone who's sick or someone who's ill, they actually need to take the medicine, right? If they just look inside of a book and look at the description of the medicine, would there be any use in that? Would it help them at all? No, right? It wouldn't help them.
그래서 시바지부가 드네 persona 드네 투바지부 판통마라 마서 남제세요 투바 삼바 곰바세요 투성곰섬라 왔더니 투바지부가 판통마라 했으라더니 투바지부가 데라 판통마라스 투비가 돈다대 가래임바데 삼비 셰럽 그러와 삼로 땅에 삼비 셰럽 되게 야고진이 돈답죠 그래서 되게 돈다대 하고 그러니 시적으로 와 어떤지랬어.
So when we talk about knowledge here, just knowledge alone won't help us. And when we talk about knowledge, we also talk about study or listening to the Dharma teaching. So just having study or knowledge alone won't help. What's the point of study? When we talk about study, we also talk about contemplation and meditation. So study is actually supposed to help the wisdom that arises from contemplation. So this study or this knowledge that we gain has to help us give rise to certainty so that we can develop the wisdom of contemplation.
Masotini ni korwa ga tata ngasotini kange chigyorwa dinge yorwa kore dinge de trotogurasana trotogumaras dene inditaso maso korwa li tariya tang kore dinge li trora ge chela zo garche gurasana zo gumbi nyamselen guras gumbi nyamlen ge tane soso laglenchi nyamnon te ge tane ta maraso ganse gurtene kange dinge to sola donlen che tang lamde che tang wa sama nyamlen da den ge che tang sama ha ku guras.
So again, when we're talking about study here, the point of studying is in order to aid our contemplation. But also just having contemplation and study alone isn't enough. It's not sufficient in and of itself. So we also need practice. We need meditation, which is this third aspect. So for example, here we are in samsara and we encounter all kinds of difficulties. We encounter all kinds of suffering. And so with just knowledge and contemplation, if we encounter such difficulties, we won't be able to be free of them. We won't be able to be liberated from them. What we actually need is we need meditation. We need practice. And so with meditation and with practice, then we can actively take on the suffering of samsara. We can actively practice with the suffering and the problems that we encounter in samsara.
Dordina doyenanda ngayenanda karena chapriyo mara so tamchen also nyamse lentante hago gogdate nyamse lentante tusam gomsam gogoni nyamse lengora tusum gomsam gogoni nyamse lengwate chikpares ngala me yinayo tusum gomsam je magwaji yo mares tusum gomsam lamne nyam je gwata ndene doyena chikparwa tene ita nyamse lentante sete 가르지 nyamse lengwarasana ani tusum gomsam tera
So essentially, what are we saying here? Well, basically what we're saying is that whether we're practicing sutra or whether we're practicing mantra or whatever the case may be, it's the same. We need to know how to practice. And how is it that we're supposed to practice? Well, we need to practice in terms of study, contemplation, and meditation, these three aspects. And this is the same whether we're talking about practicing in sutra or mantra. So we need to practice without separating any of these three aspects.
pena kambaye na tambo demu ku goche gorwa dendo go chiteni to be shared the mesoina ngaraso go karsena teni nyamselen ta to so tamcheteni shigiyo mares.
So when we're talking about the wisdom of study, for example, if we don't have the wisdom of study, then we don't know how to practice. We don't know what it is that we need to practice. And so, for example, it's just like when we talk about a house, how do you get into the house? Well, first you need the key. You need the key to open the door. So likewise, in order to engage in the practice, first we need the wisdom of study.
냠내야 잠깐만 와. 어떤 게 인지 타서다. 삼비 셰럽 그때니 가르쳐놨더니다. 강서 기라 담보 투바데 원던 와. 아니 삼비 셰럽 그 가르쳐놨더니 네 강서 존닥도서 파미바제고 그랬을
So then likewise, we talk about the wisdom of contemplation, and without this, then we don't know how to practice well, we don't know how to practice properly. Why is that? It's because we won't gain this kind of certainty that we need in order to engage in the practice. And so without this wisdom of contemplation, and without this certainty, then we won't have good practice, we won't be able to practice well. So first, what do we need? First we need study, and then based on that, we need to engage in this contemplation. And then based on that contemplation, we gain this certainty and we get rid of our misconceptions.
아니, 군비 셰럽대 가르쳐나. 투비 셰럽당. 아니 가르쳐놨더니 투비 셰럽 그 하고 아니 삼비 셰럽 그 존도 인신이어와. 인신이어와. 되겠던 데라더니 다 영내한테 냠는지 냠냠싸 그랬더니. 하고서 냠냠싸야. 냠냠싸야 된저부 대가르쳐놨더니 군비 셰럽 들어갔더니 어떤 지들이 군비가 라렌데라 라리 그랬어.
So then the third aspect here is the wisdom born from meditation. So first, we have the other two aspects. We have study and contemplation. And so study basically leads us to understand. It leads us to understand properly. And contemplation leads us to gain certainty. It leads us to gain certainty and to dispel these misconceptions. And so then, what do we need after that? Well, then we actually need to get experience. We need to gain this experience. And this experience is based on actually practicing meditation. It's based on the implementation of meditation.
근데 인비다서 라렌세야 되게 친구랬어. 하고서 라렌세야 매송이나 되니 내가 가리나 이 부다 보지 연구만 봐. 부다 보세나 하고요. 부다보라가 그래.
Good. Genuine.
근데 그 부다보 연구만 했어. 부다보였는데 라렌다 라리 그랬어.
So when we talk about practicing here, putting things into practice, this is something that's very important. So without this practice, then we won't have genuine experience. And so this is based off of actually putting things into practice.
맨소야 하고서 맨소야 라레요나 되니 거라더니 드기양더니 맨라지르게스 드하고서 드기양 만나줘야다 사게 땅들라 그래서 사땅세나 하고서 사땅 무보여로 왔더니 무보 탐기 만 마행켄지 요 말했어 거다 라레요나 하고서 내가 멤버지를 빼잖아 거다 라레냐 보여나 사땅의 사이나다 치땅 도땅 매라서 봐 만마행켄 그 지지가 요 말했어 그래서 거다 라레요나 사탕 만들 맞을 가야메스 가르잖아. 사탕은 만마인 게 지요 말스. 다 남셔냈어.
So when we talk about gaining experience of meditation, this actually needs practice. We actually need to implement the practice. We need to implement the meditation. And so for example, when we talk about a doctor, if a doctor is skilled in making medicine, basically if the doctor is putting what he knows into practice, then he can even use poison as a medicine. He can even poison can be used as a medicine in that case. In fact, if the doctor is very skilled, if the doctor has good practice, basically, then everything can be used as medicine. So everything that the doctor sees, whether it be dirt or water or rocks, all of that can be used as some kind of medicine.
근데 인도에서 또 정말 가서 랄렌라리가 다 나오진 가서 다 지시해 봐야 가서 남지 람철 세지거든. 람 근처 통데 간지진 해보거든. 근데 랄렌 어떤 해보고 왔더니 랄렌 매송이나 람든 쳇도 뭐 와. 되는 가서 가서는 되게 뭐세대 람든 쳇이야 왔더니 가서 나람에 그 가다 먹체와지 람철 마인 괜지 시에요 말았더라. 나 남에세나다. 나 람에 마했나요? 나더니 가서는 나 지나니요 왔더니 나 지나니요 신나니 강급 갑라이나 나랑서 너희가 남든 제땅생가 너희가 세나 하고서 너희가 하고서 지기자 저러도 너희가 세라 도서 탐지 람치니 뜻이야 봤다고 근데 차성이었어. 그러거든. 다 든지 so 탐체 가르쳤더니 강원나 라리 바르스는 두조 탐체 람체시아바 상마데 가르치니 랩 버르스는 곰비 냠뇽 구거니라 냠뇽 구거니 라렌치데리라더니 랩부그레스.
So all of these things are actually based on practice. They depend on the practice, and this is also the case when we talk about taking things onto the path. Taking things onto the path relies on actually practicing. And so when we talk about the vehicle of mantra, we talk about taking this life itself onto the path. So when we're talking about mantra, there's nothing at all that can't be taken onto the path. And so normally we talk about the 5 sense pleasures and so forth. So all of this is to be taken onto the path in the vehicle of mantra. So when we're talking about how it is that we actually take things onto the path, we need to take things onto the path through meditation and through practice. Energy power.
Energy power.
Mambalagi.
Tendrik tini karsan samaki chorong ni batte gres. Hakoso drop chegre ni batte gre. What tendrik sala lemnata nyamnan te karsan natini. Kanso aso nyamnan na reba chembu yores. Nyamnan natini karsan nyamnan uni nga nyamselen tamgi yoke talo ra. Hakoso taksen hakoso tangsen ro. Musin nga se de kani sheba samjing mai ba. Musin nga nyamsen len lenin ju tonggi yopa ka ta so tini ta febres.
So when we're talking about the vehicle of mantra here, whenever we get any kind of experience, since we're all practitioners of mantra here, then everything that appears as practice. Everything is something that will aid us in our practice, no matter what appears. Everything will give us power. It will help us in our practice, and it will appear as practice itself. So we're all practitioners of mantra here, so this is what we need to do. And then if we're able to practice in such a way, then we will surely attain the sign of being able to directly take all of these things onto the path.
근데 이제 타서 가서 년년 밖에 당가서 lappenat네 네 가서 그랬더니 난 디앙 너 같이 그래서 막 그거 너 그래서 삼지 삼로도 상마 판매 받자 상마같이 얘기했더니 가서는 상마그 소소다 적재 받으라 어떤 얘기 나왔대 잘 그랬어.
So then we as practitioners, we need to get rid of this kind of mindset that things will be harmful to us. Oh, if this happens, then there will be this kind of harm, there will be this kind of damage. So we need to get rid of these kind of thoughts and actually understand that everything will aid us in our practice. All appearances will aid us in our practice. So when we talk about this way, then we can talk about the 4 or 5 elements again. So when we talk about the elements, then if we're able to practice in this way, then even the element of earth will aid us. It will assist us in our practice. Even the element of water will assist us in our practice. So when we think like this, of course, temporarily, all of these things will help us, but even ultimately, these things will aid or assist us. So we have to get rid of any idea that these things will impede us in our practice. Both temporarily and ultimately, they will assist us in our practice. So we have to get rid of any kind of idea that such things harm us or that we're defeated by such things. So actually all of these things will help us. They will be of benefit to us. And so look at how our bodies are now, how big we've all grown, and this is because of the elements all assisting one another.
미리 리턴 토리아다 말한 소리를 보라고요. 그래서 정말 같은 첨부로 와. 들으지더니 종아도 좀 가르쳤더니 같은 대수 찍쪽 찍지 봐게 되게 같은 데 장고 그랬어. 같은 데라더니 삼도 땅고 그랬어.
So again, the elements is what our body is composed of. They are what has made our body. And so actually the fact that the elements have made our body is something that's very kind. It's very kind of the elements, and this is based on them assisting each other or aiding each other, right? So we need to be able to appreciate or recall this great kindness of the elements.
니 냠낸 산토슈데 나서 가상시바 마신 종아지 모두도 장고 있어. 하고서 모두도 temperature 텐디지 소아이나 딱가서는 종아지 그랬더니 와서 니급이랑 쪽지바를 탈뜨기 영화로서 나가서는 쪽지야더라. 근데 그 가서는 빼 그네 그땅 탈뜨기라 반톡배 다인자 친구였어.
So when we talk about the highest form of practice, then we need to recall what's the essence of the elements. And when we do that, then we realize that both temporarily and ultimately there is a vast benefit because of these elements.
근데 나서 가서는 딱 가서 강수를 빼놨더니 네가 삼반은 좀 나서요. 우리 진 중화지 함을치 있어. 근데 송해야 됐을 때. 가서 되니까 가서는 우리 진 중화지 함을치 중화랑 설시를 계속면 송해야. 이 측대하고서 진 중화지 함을치 있어. 중화지 이 함을세나 가서 중화가르스네. 중화 제가 중화가 된거로서 임친가 못 잡아지려 봐. 임친모. 가서 중화지 임친가 못 잡아지려 봐. 근데 이제 다시 다가서는 나서 탐지 빼나 라미그 쪽에 그런 문제 따라다니 가서는 어진 중화지 함을치 송다가 중화지 세용되다 임친가 같은 사진매로 중화지대로 보고 열었어. 중화지 함을 어진 세대다서 그런 문제 보고 열어. 좀 그런 문제 나서 탐지 그 가서는 로와서는 당연히 쪽대로 왔더니 던져부터 가서는 냠는 그 쪽에 딱 라마데 쪽에 있는데 다서 중화지에게서 그런 부채로 와 그런 부채 될라더니 콜트 가를 걸 그랬잖아 남병아 손 그런 중화지 마찬가지 요만 왔더니 중화지 상만을 열어 근데 이따 어진 중화지가 한번서 근데 지나더니 중화도서 노바변은 사임 플래그가 사임하고서 사임방 중화군 노바 무슨 칠로대야 다 사임해야 나서 봐 어떤 그 값들아요 중화군 뭐도서 전고 그랬어 하고서 중화군 뭐들은 미시 중화군 뭐들은 전전지라 중화군 노바도서 항상 시 그랬을 랑사 시와스나 하고서 용하고 노바도 시 쪽제야다 그래서 된 판통 자체부 열었어 어떤 데 있다서더니 용하스야 되겠더니 가서 대송가 소라 찍듯이 그래서 노바제 그래 삼는 삼노도 파이기네 봐 어떤 지 많이 봐 탐지 그 쪽제 봤다 탐지에 가서 냠는다 그렇더야지 람도 차터라 다 던데지 딱 라메기 샷당 거랑다 냠는 제당다 딱 거랑다 리우게 열었어.
So even in the prayer to spontaneously fulfill wishes, it talks about the four elements as being the four great consorts, like we discussed before. And so there it talks about the nature of everything. So everything has these four elements, right? There's nothing at all which isn't composed of these 4 or 5 elements. And so again, these are the nature of the four great consorts. And so when we talk about any kind of environmental harm, whether it be earthquakes or anything like that, we need to recall the nature of the elements. What is their essence? What is their nature? And then the elements will naturally be pacified. And if we're able to practice in this way, then everything will help us, everything will benefit us, everything will be able to be taken on to the path. So we need to get rid of this thought that the elements harm us in any kind of way.
근데 인데 다서 가서는 근데다 근데 삼노 다나다 가서 리데 가서는 중앙 실리 좀 봐봐. 근데 인데 다서다 중앙 제가 장신테 했더니 니 하고 송아이나 모두 송아 인디다다 타가르 모텔리다리 온디다 다 나나메 그 가다 같은 시바에 봐. 라니 랑그 리니 사이 포트랑스. 나랑서 리딘 중앙 제가 했더니 저 봐봐. 근데 뭐 라메 그 타와테 다스테 간르랬습니다. 리니 사이 포트랑스. 니 나니 가르레 송고 포트랑라 봐. 니 셈니 가르레 추르키 포트랑라 봐. 어떤 지달이 나랑 소라 요바글리 나 일섬데 어떤 지달이 나더니 니 강서를 했더니 냠내라 던지 쉐그레스.
So again, our body is made or composed by these four elements. So if we know the nature of the elements, for example, in mantra, it's just as we discussed before. Our body is the divine palace or the palace of the gods. And so this is the view in mantra. And likewise, when we talk about speech, our ordinary speech is the palace of enlightened speech. And our mind is the palace of the Dharmakaya. So this is how it is explained.
Lini hai pota ni de li de tamal wa chi res ni lin de cha da na ka ram jen sam tang da na de we yang te ma to thon ya yo ma ka sam tan de res de ni ma so sam de la jirwa tang ne ro ta ni jirwa tang se ko na ga ta nyam ne ki set de ma ra wa yin ba to so chang ha ku ko res.
So when we understand things in this way, then we can use our body like that. We can use our body because it's actually something that's very sacred, it's very precious. So if we had this kind of thought like, oh, my body is actually really ordinary, it's composed of blood, pus, and so forth, then we won't get the blessings that we talked about before, right? What were the blessings that we discussed before? The blessings are this divine ambrosia of the gods, right? And so we need to change our way of thinking and recognize that our body is actually something quite sacred.
Ramjin de hako yonde ta sangaran so roni de la ta rani jerbi chen kor sen ka sa shiba ba moten ru de ni ta jerbi gi chen kor moten de getani za chimbu se gura ta den ri ma res.
So when we talk about the unsurpassed vehicle of mantra, what we need to know is that our body is the mandala of the victorious ones. It's the mandala of the enlightened ones. And so when we talk about the different aspects of our body, such as our flesh, our blood, and so forth, and then gradually we realize the nature of the channels and the winds. We have to understand what their nature is, and then once we understand what their nature is, then we will know how sacred our body is, that our body is actually the mandala of the victorious ones.
Tetani ngani song ko photang shiba yamba song kar yor sena tani ngara so namjen se gyo tani song ya yanlak tikchi se gyo wa tani sanji ge song de song ya yanlak tikchi se ra yanlak tikchi se ha ko song tukchu tamba song ya yanlak tikchi se gyo wa yenna yang garsen ta ga so dor diba jin sho sho jin song ya yanlak tikchi se ni she ba wa re ma to jirwa sanji ge song ge yenden de chang me ba res ha ko song sanji ge song ge yenden de chang me ba yende So
again, when we talk about ordinary speech, when we talk about our own speech, it is said that our own speech is the palace of enlightened speech. It's the palace of the Buddha's speech. And normally when we talk about the Buddha's speech, we talk about it in terms of these 60 different aspects. Actually, if we talk about what the real case is, the qualities of the Buddha's speech are actually innumerable. They're countless. However, when we come to understand the nature of our own speech, actually, this is what the nature of our own speech is. It's this palace of the Buddha's speech, of the enlightened speech.
Ranjentela soya yalla trichila so pa ge zul sena ko son zul da res zul sena
treasure zul
soya yalla trichi ge den yenden ta ge soya yalla trichi zul da de ngara so nga res ha ko son de nga ko ran ranjen res yina ya ngaranso tata gachi mebarsin ngaranso ti rangjen de taro matok parwa matok pa tendre bula nyam nyoma so de ge matok rangla yubi ge matok rang de taso ta taro ngaranso zote de ngoshi ge yomarsi ina zot soso la yores.
So when we talk about the nature of our ordinary speech, its nature is actually that it's a treasury. It's the treasury of the Buddha's speech. But however, we don't recognize that that's the case. We don't realize that that's the case. We don't realize that we actually have this. We have this treasure of the Buddha's speech.
근데 나라서 저는 저요 바테카스나 되니다. 그 인덴데 뭐마시라 대표주 명어된 나라서 가르치겠어. 나그거니 되니다. 메jan다가 직접 마와. 직접세나 같이 디자셔로 와. 직접 마와다. 아니 메jan다가 같이 많이 마셔 봐라 왔네. 그냥 마 셰바라 소파 된적이 쇼가 되네. 가라 배주 땅에서. 배주 녹버 땅 가서 와. 된적이었어. 그래서 탐지 가서 나가 람젠데 하고 소에나 왔다 가서 된지 가서 나가서다 소소 그때는 갑자기 가르잖아. 나 된적 그 정말 연든 단순 소파 그때니 송야야가 특질라 소파 그 저인 소나 된적 그때니 가서는 되니 준도서 탐지 배주 땅나 그 말에서 소소 그때니 가서는 답이긴 당마다 답이긴 된적 그때니다. 가서 그때니 따바지고 와. 와 되게 보냈더니 냠는 제송에 있는데 나딱 봐서 나한테 넘버 따는 데 타서다 가서는 되니다. 소소라 유비는 줬다. 때는 줬다 지고 왔더니 때는 줬다 했더니 고치니 원수지야 토그러 와. 어떤 일이었어.
So again, we don't recognize this fact that we actually have this treasure of the Buddha's speech within us. It's something that we already possess. And so because of the fact that we don't recognize this, it leads us to slander others. It leads us to use our speech in improper ways. It leads us to speak unpleasantly to others. And this is because we don't understand or recognize the fact that we have this Buddha's speech, and so then we use our speech improperly. And so, therefore, since we possess all of these perfect qualities of the Buddha's speech, we possess this treasure already, then it's not appropriate for us to use our speech like that, to slander others and to say unpleasant things to others. So we actually need to use our speech in a way that's very pure. And then if we're able to use our speech like that, we can actually enjoy this treasure of the Buddha's speech. We can partake of it.
아니 나가니데 얘니 송그 찍고리 말아 송그 되게 ram신이 봐 된다고 그때니 가르스나더니 다 윤단 탐지 그때 자와야 봐 소소라 유대비 리네다 나도서 탐지 그 ram신데 얘니 넘버 딱 봐라 윤단 탐지 그랬다 지금 봐 된다고 가르스나더니 다 가서 그랬더니 다 남지가 그 가닥세야 특지 하고 여와 나한테 쉽지않나 다른 말인데 소소 리다 나다 소소 ram신데다
So when we talk about the key point of our body, or the nature of our body, the nature of our body is primordially pure. It's pure from the very beginning. It's this divine mandala, this mandala of the gods. And so, again, when we talk about our speech, it's the same way. Our ordinary speech is this enlightened speech. It's this Buddha speech. And so actually everything that we possess is primordially pure. And so we use this term kata, which means basically primordial purity or alpha purity. And so if we gradually apply this idea of primordial purity to our body, our speech, and so forth, then we will come to understand the meaning of this term, primordial purity.